Well, hello everyone and welcome to yet another Discussions with Dolf. And believe it or not, despite today's dramatic backdrop, I am still in the heart of Phoenix, Arizona. In fact, we're no more than about 15 miles or whatever that is, 22, 23 kilometers from the airport here, the Sky Harbor International Airport here in Phoenix. And this is part of Paradise Valley. What you see behind me is part of Camelback Mountain. And I don't know if you can make it out there, but there is a house here which is right on this big rocky outcrop. In fact, we are blessed that we have no earthquakes here in Phoenix, because it would be an area for a house that would be prone to a lot of shaking if there ever were an earthquake. In fact, one of the nice things about living in Phoenix is that we have almost no natural disasters at all. When you think about it, there's essentially no hurricanes and cyclones and typhoids and tornadoes. There's no flooding, there's no earthquakes, there's no landslides, there's nothing of that sort. We have a lot of hot weather, of course. People say that's a curse, but you know, it's also the weather that brings a lot of people here. We get the so-called snowbirds. These are people who evade the snow in other states like, I don't know, Minnesota and Wyoming and all that, where for much of the winter it's covered in snow. So they come here for the winter and then they go back home for the summer, and they do that 4 or 5 years, and then one day a couple will say to each other, honey, why don't we just stay here and save all that moving back and forth, and they end up living here. That's what happens. That's why we have so many golf courses. For instance, there are over 200 golf courses in Phoenix, and I'm not talking about holes, I'm talking about 18-hole golf courses, because if you decide to have a game of golf, 3 weeks on Saturday, you can almost bet your bottom dollar that you'll be able to play your game. You will not be stopped by weather the way you are in many other parts of the world. Anyway, as usual, I'm here to answer your questions, and I have a question today from Margaret Hampton out of Albuquerque, New Mexico. And Margaret says, Dolf, could you please explain, is there any merit in leasing my properties out fully furnished? Okay, Margaret, well, that's an interesting question. Most people, of course, rent their properties or lease them, as you put it, unfurnished, and the tenants bring their own furniture. There are some advantages to that, because if they do bring their own furniture, the theory is that they'll be more permanent, because the effort involved in moving double beds and fridges and goodness knows what, well, here in America often the fridges go with the property, but not in all parts of the world. But in order to move all that furniture, it takes so much effort that people aren't going to decide on a whim to go somewhere else and rent there. So a lot of people prefer not to include the furniture. Also, they say it's a lot of extra work, because when this breaks down or that breaks down, or they say, hey, there are bed bugs in the bed, or the springs are short or something like that, you need to come and replace it, then you at least have to think about it and evaluate it, and if you have to do it, you have to then purchase it and have it delivered, etc., etc. But there are other people who say that no, if you rent your properties out fully furnished, you can charge an extra premium on that compared with the same rental if the property, of course, were vacant, that more than covers the cost of acquiring and maintaining that furniture. So I would say do some sums. I don't have a definitive answer that is valid in all times in all parts of the world, but I do have some suggestions as to how you can find out. So the first thing I do is go to a rental company. And even if you don't want to say, hey, I'm a landlord, I'm never going to use you, however, I want to ask you some questions and waste your time, I wouldn't quite put it that way. In fact, consider whether you should use a rental company, because they'll take all the work off your hands. If you own one property, and I know I'm going on a few tangents, but I'm known to do that. If you have just one property, then you can manage it yourself, no trouble at all, and you can probably handle 2 and maybe 3. But if you have 20 properties, and by the way, if you don't, you should aim to have 20, but if you have 20, it's probably a full-time job managing them. And I would pose a question to you: do you really want to be managing your 20 properties, or do you want to give that work to someone else and they can do it for a fee, and you can devote all that time that you would have spent managing finding another property to add to the portfolio? So you should consider whether you get a manager in and say, listen, I'm considering using a manager. Could you in the meantime please tell me, what would a property like this rent for, unfurnished, and what would it rent for if it were fully furnished? And see what they say. If the premium is not enough to justify it, then maybe don't do it. But I think you're going to find that very often, if you leave furniture in there, and you can accumulate it at great prices at garage sales or garage sales, depending on which part of the world you're in, or second-hand shops, or even if you buy it new, depending on the quality of the home, of course. There are many homes in Phoenix that are rented out on vacation rental bases, where you wouldn't dream of getting second-hand furniture, because it wouldn't be commensurate with the rest of the house. But anyway, do your sums, and you may well find out that you've got a very interesting and lucrative little side business going. By the way, you have to check out the depreciation rates on furniture too, because usually in jurisdictions where you can depreciate the property, you can depreciate it anything from 2% to about 4%, depending on where you are. Sometimes they disallow that. But whether or not they allow depreciation of the building, usually they will allow you to depreciate the furniture and the contents and the fittings, as they call it, the cutlery and the crockery if you care to have that, and the linen and the mattresses and the beds and the wardrobes and the cupboards and the toasters and the microwaves and the fridges and the stoves at a much, much higher rate, and it could well be worth your while. So Margaret, it's a great question, but this is one where really you have to do the sums for your jurisdiction. Hope to see you again soon. In the meantime, as always, successful investing. Thank you.